In the hallowed annals of military history, few names command as much reverence as Carlos Norman Hathcock the Skin. Known to his peers and enemies alike as White Feather, this U.S. Marine sniper achieved a level of lethality that transformed him into a living legend. Within the elite circles of marksmen, Hathcock is celebrated for his confirmed record of at least 93 enemy kills during the Vietnam War, a feat accomplished from staggering distances with a level of accuracy that defied belief. Yet beneath the cold, calculating exterior of a professional hunter lay a deeply compassionate family man. For Hathcock, the act of taking a life was never a source of joy, it was a grim necessity. He operated under the heavy conviction that every enemy soldier he eliminated was a potential life saved, a young American boy who might otherwise never return home from the jungle. The journey of this legendary sniper began far from the humid tropics of Southeast Asia. Born in 1942 in Little Rock, Arkansas, Carlos came from the humblest of origins. Following the separation of his parents during his early childhood, he was raised by his grandparents. It was in the dense woods of Arkansas that his natural instincts were first honed. As a young boy, Carlos would venture into the wilderness with his dog, carrying an old single-shot .22 caliber rifle. This was not merely a hobby, it was a means of survival as he hunted game to help provide food for his family's table. Throughout these formative years, he harbored a singular ambition: to become a U.S. Marine. Upon reaching the age of 17, he wasted no time and enlisted in the Corps. Hathcock's initial training took place at Camp Perry, situated on the windswept shores of Lake Erie in Ohio. This location proved to be the ideal crucible for his development, as the camp boasted the second-largest outdoor rifle range on the planet. It was here that Carlos's innate talent for marksmanship began to flourish into something extraordinary. He was not just a naturally gifted shot, he was obsessively meticulous and precise, treating the craft of long-range shooting with the discipline of a master artisan. His prowess quickly translated into success on the competitive circuit. In 1965, he won the prestigious Wimbledon Cup for long-range shooting, a competition that required participants to strike targets with absolute precision from a distance of 1,000 yards. When Carlos was first deployed to Vietnam, he served as a military policeman. However, this role was short-lived. The U.S. Marine Corps was beginning to realize that the conflict in Vietnam was unlike any war they had fought before. The traditional front lines were non-existent, and the military leadership recognized a desperate need for innovative tactics to gain the upper hand. One of the primary strategies proposed was a dramatic expansion of the sniper program. Given his extraordinary record, Carlos was an obvious choice for the role. After completing a specialized sniper training course in South Vietnam, his lethal capabilities were finally unleashed on the battlefield. For the majority of his service, Hathcock relied on the standard-issue U.S. Marine sniper rifle, the bolt-action Winchester Model 70. Chambered in the powerful .30-06 caliber, this weapon featured a 5-round magazine and was equipped with a telescopic sight that magnified targets up to 8 times. However, there were occasions when the mission demanded something even more formidable. In these instances, Carlos utilized a Browning .50 caliber heavy machine gun, which he had personally modified by adding a telescopic sight. This was a massive, unwieldy weapon, measuring over 5 feet in length and weighing nearly 130 pounds when mounted on its tripod. Despite its bulk, the weapon's range and stopping power were unparalleled in the right hands. In 1967, Hathcock utilized this modified 150 caliber machine gun to etch his name into the record books. He successfully engaged a Viet Cong guerrilla who was transporting rifles on a bicycle at a staggering distance of 2,500 yards, nearly 1.5 miles away. The bullet struck the target squarely in the chest after a flight time of over 2.5 seconds. To put this distance into perspective, it would take an average person approximately 20 minutes of brisk walking to cover the same ground. This incredible world record for the longest-range sniper kill would remain unbroken for 35 years until a Canadian sniper surpassed it in Afghanistan in 2002. As his reputation grew, Hathcock became known by the moniker White Feather, a reference to the small white feather he defiantly wore in the band of his bush hat. On the hunt, Carlos entered what he described as the bubble, a state of absolute Zen-like concentration. In this headspace, every rustle of a leaf and every slight breeze carried vital information. His dedication was so intense that he could remain in a state of total focus for days at a time, often going without sleep as he stalked his prey. One of his most famous engagements involved a sadistic female Viet Cong platoon leader known as the Apache Woman. She was notorious for her brutal interrogation techniques, which included flaying captured U.S. Marines alive within earshot of their base so their comrades could hear their screams. Driven by the horrors he had heard, Carlos made it his mission to eliminate her, even though he suspected it might be a counter-sniper trap. After spotting her moving toward a latrine area, he initially called in an artillery strike on the position, which killed 3 of her accompanying snipers. As the Apache woman attempted to flee, Carlos fired, striking her and causing her to fall. He then fired a second shot to ensure the threat was permanently neutralized. As his tally of confirmed kills rose, the North Vietnamese began to fear him deeply. They eventually placed a $30,000 bounty on his head, an amount equivalent to over $250,000 today. This was the highest bounty ever placed on a U.S. sniper during the conflict. Many enemy marksmen attempted to collect that bounty, but they all met a grim end as Hathcock systematically picked them off. One of the most legendary encounters was a sniper duel with an elite enemy operative codenamed the Cobra. While tracking his opponent, Carlos caught a sudden glint of light reflecting off the Cobra's scope. He immediately aligned the crosshairs of his Winchester Model 70 and pulled the trigger. The bullet traveled the long distance and passed directly through the enemy's own telescopic sight, entering his eye socket and killing him instantly. Carlos later reflected that for such a shot to be possible, the Cobra must have been aiming directly at him at that very moment. He had simply been a fraction of a second faster. He took the enemy's rifle as a souvenir, though it was later lost. The war also forced Carlos to make agonizing decisions. On one occasion, from a hilltop 1,500 yards away, he observed a 12-year-old Viet Cong guerrilla transporting weapons and ammunition to an enemy patrol on a bicycle. Hathcock had no desire to kill a child, but he knew those weapons would soon be used against his fellow Marines. He initially fired a warning shot into the front wheel of the bicycle, sending the boy tumbling over the handlebars. Instead of fleeing, the boy grabbed an AK-47 and began firing toward Carlos's position. With no other choice, Carlos fired a single, well-aimed shot, killing the boy. This event would haunt his conscience for the rest of his life. Just days before his first deployment was scheduled to end, Carlos volunteered for a high-stakes mission, the assassination of a North Vietnamese general at his own headquarters deep in the forest. The mission required him to get within 800 yards, and he chose to go alone, without a spotter. For this task, he removed his signature white feather. He meticulously camouflaged himself, weaving vegetation into his clothing and covering his skin in paint to blend into the environment. As the general stepped out of a plantation house toward a waiting vehicle, Carlos held his breath and fired a single shot to the chest. The general fell dead, and Carlos managed to exfiltrate the area without being detected by enemy patrols. While Hathcock's official tally stands at 93 confirmed kills, the actual number is likely in the hundreds. The Marine Corps' criteria for a confirmed kill were incredibly strict, requiring both an officer and a spotter to witness the event. In 1969, his time on the front lines came to a violent conclusion. The LVT-5 amphibious armored vehicle he was riding in struck a landmine on a highway near his base. The vehicle was instantly engulfed in a massive fireball. Despite the intense heat and the imminent danger of the onboard ammunition exploding, Carlos repeatedly ran back into the inferno to pull his fellow Marines to safety. He suffered horrific burns across his body in the process. In critical condition, Carlos was medevaced to a hospital ship and then to a naval hospital in Tokyo. Eventually, he was returned to the United States for specialized treatment at a burn center in San Antonio, Texas. He was awarded the Purple Heart for his injuries that day, but it would take another 30 years for his extraordinary heroism during the rescue to be fully recognized with the Silver Star. After months of grueling recovery, he returned to active duty and spent several years helping to establish the Marine Corps Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, passing his knowledge to a new generation. By 1975, however, his health began to fail. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and his condition deteriorated over the following years. In 1979, at the age of 37, the man who had become a gunnery sergeant was forced into medical retirement, just 55 days short of completing 20 years of service. Transitioning to civilian life was a struggle. He battled deep depression, and the strain nearly ended his marriage. He eventually found solace in shark fishing, which provided the mental challenge he needed to stay focused. He also served as an instructor for various police departments and special forces units. The battle with multiple sclerosis finally ended in 1999 when Carlos passed away at the age of 56. His legacy, however, lived on through his son, who followed in his footsteps by joining the Marines. In his honor, Springfield Armory produced a high-grade variant of the M21 sniper rifle, naming it the M25 White Feather Tactical Rifle. Today, the original Winchester rifle that Carlos carried through the jungles of Vietnam is preserved and on display at the Marine Corps Sniper Museum in Quantico, a testament to the man who became a shadow in the trees. If this deep dive into the life of a legendary marksman has changed the way you look at the shadows of military history, please subscribe and like the channel. We are currently unearthing the stories that the world tried to bury. Help us cultivate the future by remembering the past. Our next investigation into the archives of history will begin shortly.